Okay, welcome back to another meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. I am your host, Keisha Hamilton, and I am excited to be back with you all for another Wednesday night conversation. It has been a minute. I've had a few things happen over the past few weeks that have just not allowed me to get on, but I'm excited to be back with you all now. And like I said, we're going to jump right in because I always like to jump right in. Okay, so at a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton, we explore racial equity from a historically authentic lens. So I got a couple things that I'm going to tell you today because it's very important. You read the title on this one. I want you to know a little bit more about myself today because I think that's just important for you to understand why I say what I say, you know, the perspective that I come from and how I've reached my space of specialty and expertise. So when we explore history from a racial equity lens, from a historically authentic racial equity lens, we do that. And that means that history informs our perspective, it guides our responses, and it's a roadmap that we use to ensure that transformation is reached. Okay. Anybody who's done any type of research, and I have a lot of educated viewers, and I'm grateful for that. You know, those of you who've done some education and gotten a few degrees, or you know, or you just like to do research, you know that history repeats itself if we don't kind of look at what has happened, why it's happened, and then you know are intentional about shifting up the variable so that the consequences and the outcome later will be different. So if we don't do that, then history just continues to repeat itself. So history teaches us a lot of things. It shows us everything. It teaches us, just a lot. And so we rely heavily on history to inform our perspectives, in this arena of racial equity. So we do this by exploring history, the history of Black and Indigenous and other people of color voices. My area of specialty is based on my personal experiences, and my personal experiences are varied. So here it is where you're going to learn a little bit more about who Keisha is. I am a Black American woman. Okay, that's probably not surprising to some of you, but I am a Black American woman. The experience of a Black American person is different from Black people who come here from other countries and who are not American. Okay, so I am a Black American woman, and I speak from the Black American woman experience. My ancestors were slaves here in America, and that's the perspective. That's what runs through my genes. That's what's in my genealogy. That's what's in my DNA. The experience of being a Black American woman. Okay, my ancestors being here and being enslaved, formerly. So that's what's in my genes. That's what's in my blood. And that's the experience that I come from. My personal perspective, like I said, it carries the weight of those experiences of being a Black American and then a woman. Okay, I'm also a mom, here in America. My varied experience also includes being married to a white man. So I am a woman who was married to a Black American woman who was married to a white American man. Okay, he's his ancestors, I don't know where they may have come from, maybe Irish or something like that, because he's a redhead. But the experience of being a Black American woman, a very Black American woman married to a very white American man, also informs my perspective, which makes a big difference. If you've never lived closely, so we talk about on a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton, how our reality that we experience in America is a white reality. Okay, everything has been whitewashed. The culture that we experience, the dominant culture. So when we think about dominant, we understand that it's what prevails. It's what's first presented. It's what's everything is measured against. It's what it's what we're tested and guided by, and what everyone says. Did you measure? Did you meet this? And if you didn't meet the dominant culture's expectations, and whatever it is that they have, if you don't meet what their standard, then you supposedly haven't arrived. Okay, so that's the culture that America has, right? So my experience is not only living as a Black American in that space, but I also happen to live in the house with, be married to, and I actually have 6 children with a white American man. So my proximity to whiteness has been much closer than most Black American people, because I just had that experience. And that's just important when you understand what informs and how I have reached and come to, and just the experiences that I've had to bring me to the space that I'm in today. I've had a lot of 16 years worth of experience of being very close to not only, as just a Black person living in America, the dominant culture, but being in a home with, married to, like I said, a very white man. And I do have, like I said, 6 children as a result of that relationship. My children, while they are, biracial and they live the biracial experience themselves, I, as an African-American woman, don't live the biracial experience because of my proximity to my children and being very intimately involved in their lives, going through life with them as a parent. I get to also have the experience of being in, like I said, close proximity to someone who's biracial, who has these 2 races in them. So I draw from those experiences as well. Now, I don't say I'm an expert in being a biracial person because I'm not biracial. I'm Black, but I do have a very close proximity to a biracial experience because I have 6 children who experience that life. Not everybody has that experience. And that's another reason why and how I form a lot of my, perspectives. So my varied experience also includes being heavily and extremely involved in a very conservative religion. So, we know that America is a very conservative country rather. America is a very conservative country. I spent almost 25 years of my life involved in. So, I wasn't in Catholicism, but when you think of, those who are Catholics and those who are like devout nuns, I would be the devout nun of the religion that I was involved in for more than 25 years. That would be the level that I was at in this very conservative religious organization. I'm even ashamed to admit that, one of my first time votings, I voted for the GOP. It was just, where I was at in my life. And I'm thankful. I'm not so embarrassed to say that because we all grow. That's the whole reason why a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton exists, because I know that people can change. I know that people can get educated and choose to walk in that educated space. So, I haven't always been not in that space. So I was previously formally in a very extremely conservative religious movement, more conservative than most. Like I said, if it were Catholicism, if I compared it to Catholicism, you would consider me the very devout nun who went away from home, and that would be the comparison as far as the level and the depth to which I was involved in that. And again, that was 25 years of my life. I know I look like I'm not, some people have said I look like I could be about 25. I'm actually older than 25, and so I did actually spend 25 years of my life in that space. I'm also the second child that was born to a single parent 1 month from her graduation from high school. So let me repeat that because that might be confusing. I'm the second child that was born to a single woman when she graduated from high school. And I was born 1 month before she graduated from high school. So I'm obviously, my mother was a teen mom and I was her second child. That also informs my perspective. I lived the life of a African-American who experiences the collateral damage of racism, including, not only, being the second born child to a woman who was graduating from high school. I was born in April, she graduated in May. I also, experienced the collateral damage of not seeing my father's face until I was 13 years old. I saw his face for 1 month at the age of 13 and did not see his face again until I think I was pregnant with my third child. These are just some of the experiences that form the person that I am, your consultant, your educator in this space. It also informs my perspective and, why I share what I share and how I share what I share. So as I mentioned about my children, they live that biracial experience, and I am fortunate to be able to, watch them through that guide them through that, you know, and then even educate myself on, you know, what they're experiencing in other ways, you know, reading books and, you know, different ways that I can find out, you know, how to help my own children. Because I'm just, you know, that's just the type of person that I am. But those are just some of the experiences that I have. So I rely heavily on the Black experience here on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton. It's really important for you to understand all that you just heard about me, to understand why I rely on the Black experience. I'm Black, and so I rely on that experience because of that reason. But also these other experiences that I've had in life, they also inform the perspectives that I've taken, right? I also believe that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, you know, and so I don't talk heavily on the Brown experience because I'm not a Brown person. Brown would be, you know, our Latinos and, you know, our Asians, you know, our indigenous, you know what I mean? Anybody who's not Black, you know what I mean? For the most part. So I don't talk specifically on their experiences because they're not my own. You know, I'm open to, and I do study on, and I do lots of research on. And when you do a lot of historical study, then you understand that coming from the Black experience alone, you understand the one experience that doesn't get talked about the most, you know, much, the one experience that is denied, the one experience that is, you know, people try to hide and suppress and ignore, and that is the Black experience. I had a good conversation with someone the other day, and all this is just for today, just so you know, this is the whole purpose. This is where I'm going today, wherever I'm going. But I did have a conversation with someone another day, and they were talking about, the term was not used, but it was basically the oppression Olympics, you know, like who was more oppressed, you know, who gets the gold for who was more oppressed. While in these spaces of anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, who gets the gold medal is not really a part of the conversation. Sometimes it can seem like, you know, to other people looking on, you know, when they want to distort the conversation, that focusing on Black issues and Black issues alone makes me out to look like I'm trying to get an award for being the most oppressed. When the fact of the matter is that we're not in a competition here. Black and Brown and our LGBTQ community, we're not in a competition here on who gets the award for being more oppressed. The issue and the focus that a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton and anybody who really understands history will help you to understand is that the reason why we focus on the Black experience is because it is the foundation for all the other experiences that individuals experience that are marginalized. So the foundation of it is in the Black experience. So a lot of times it's much easier for us as Americans to consider the experience of our LGBTQ community, you know, and to address their concerns and their issues and their pain, and all those things matter. Let me be very clear. But they're like, and this is a crude example, so understand that they're like a branch of the tree, and I talk about the root of the tree. The root of the tree is racism against Black people. Okay, so while these roots, these branches matter greatly because they're very thick branches to the tree. Okay, they matter greatly. They're not the root, and we are, as Americans, because we shy away from our history, our roots so much, because of the impact that it has on us as whiteness, and because of the implications that it has on us as an individual, we shy away from dealing with that root. And so we talk about our LGBTQ community. We talk about, our Brown community. We talk about, we can talk a little bit about indigenous folks, just a little bit, We don't want to talk about racism though against Black people. We don't even want to say the term Black people. We're uncomfortable with this. It's almost like saying racism for some people. We don't want to talk about cultural differences, which is, wild to me. People are just that reticent, that hesitant, and that wanting to suppress that experience. So anyways, on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton, I will not suppress the experience that is the foundation. Because I know, and anybody who's teaching you this, anybody who's teaching you about racial equity, you're going to find, if they're teaching you right, that when the issue and when the root of racism against Black people specifically is rooted out and addressed, every other issue that relates to it gets fixed. We've got a framework now for addressing all these issues. Now, once we are able to address that, the biggest elephant in the room, sadly, because we just have to call it, illustrations help. Once we are able to address the biggest elephant in the room against Black people, now we are able to also, we have the courage to address all these other ones. We don't address Black people and Black issues because it's too big for us, it's too difficult for us, it's too painful for us. And it's just much easier to focus on all these branches and the fruit that comes from those branches as opposed to the tree, okay? So just so you know, I rely heavily on the Black experience, full stop, on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton. I know that when we fix that, every other boat's gonna rise, okay? And we're wasting our time talking about focusing primarily on other things, on other groups that have been marginalized. Now, while the experiences of other groups are vital and they matter, and we will address them at times, again, the reason why we address what we address on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton and how we address it is because we know that when you focus on the root of racism against Black people, then you have what you need to focus on all the other groups as well, okay? You're fixing the root of the problem. So, just so you know as well, as a Black American woman, and this is very important for, our white brothers and sisters to understand, the Black experience is not a monolith. And so a monolith in this context lets you know, a monolith in this context would be, and when we say we're not a monolith, it means we don't all think the same. We don't all dress the same. We don't all have the very exact same experiences. We don't all talk the same. We don't all see everything the same, and we don't all come to the same conclusions, which is why, another thing, this is just another thought that came to my mind. When you see a group of all Black people on a commission or a board or a group or a room, you have diversity in that room. This idea, this keeps coming up, in different spaces that I'm in. And we hear this, literally, I've been hearing this my entire life, and anybody who's been Black for long enough and has had to navigate the corporate world or just the nonprofit world or, any of these spaces where the dominant culture is in control of it, this idea that a group of Black people sitting in a room needs to be diversified is incredibly wrong. Just because we're all Black don't mean we're not diverse. And I challenge you to challenge others when they say that about any groups of Black people who are all sitting together. Why do we think that a group of all white people doesn't need to be diversified? What about that room says to anybody walking by or looking in that that's an appropriate group of people? That each person in there is an individual with different experiences, different thought processes, different ideologies to some degree, and the ability to decide differently. Now, we know from what comes from those spaces and what the result is of their decision making, that they're not really diverse because we keep getting the same exact thing. Nothing has been transformed, nothing has been changed, or either the dominant voice in there that's guiding everything, it's, again, nothing changes. We recognize that those rooms actually need to be diversified. But what makes us automatically think that a group of Black people are not diverse? What about that? And that is another thing that, dominant culture needs to understand, whiteness needs to understand. And that is, that thinking is racist in thought. Now, because we are so comfortable talking about racism, racist on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton, I'm going to continue using that term. And the reason why we're so comfortable with it is because we've defined it numerous times. And I'm going to get to the definition of it soon. But we recognize that if we can't speak plainly with each other, then we can't get anywhere. If we have taboo words that define the experiences of many, and you're too, you don't want to hear from them, you're like, I can't hear that word and engage, then we can't get anywhere. So we're not shying away from those words on a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton. I hope that that doesn't make you run away, but it might, but hopefully it doesn't. We got to be able to speak plainly to each other in order to, be able to transform who we are. But again, it's very important for us to not only challenge our own thinking, but the thinking of others when they look at a group of Black and brown individuals in a certain space and say that needs to be diversified. What about that makes you think each of those people in there aren't individuals? Like, we're not a big rock, all of us in this big rock together and that's it. No, we have, if it's 5 or 6 or 7 people in the room, every one of those individuals are different, think different, have different ideology, just like a room of, all white people, which you automatically assume and just give the benefit of the doubt and default to that's an appropriate space. So anyways, that was just another thought that came up. So meeting with diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton, like I said, we rely heavily on the guideposts of history. As I mentioned, we are not the same as Black people. We don't all come to the same conclusions. And that's another thing. So many times, and these are good questions that individuals have. I get questions all the time. These are good questions that individuals have. Like, who do I listen to? Which presentation, which racial equity, curriculum do I use? What do I do? Because you will find Black and brown individuals who look very similar, even to me, who are speaking and teaching in a way that does not challenge you. It doesn't give you any challenge. You don't feel challenged from what they're saying, primarily because they're not teaching you anything that's challenging you. They're teaching you from white dominant culture standards. Okay. What makes the difference at a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton is, one, my lived experience, one, the transformation that I have intentionally put myself through and am still going through, because this is a process. You can't live, so many years of your life here in America, still living in America in a space that's constantly warring with, your transformation and think that it's an overnight occasion. It's not. I have to do continuous research, continuous study, and still find myself at times saying, wow, why did that thought come to my mind? Why did I think that way about this person? Why did I look at them like this? I still, to this day, find myself challenging thoughts that come to my mind because those thoughts are white dominant culture thoughts. So I still have to challenge. So in that, it's a good question to ask, who do I listen to? Is every Black person the one? No, you don't listen to every Black person, okay? If they're not, and this is why a meeting of diverse minds does this, it relies on the experiences of Black people and history. If we don't know history, we're doomed to repeat it. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. You can't know what the same thing is if you haven't done your history. You can't know what thought processes, you can't challenge them. You can't challenge thought processes that you have, ideology that you have, without understanding how that same thought process and ideology was present in history, and then the results from that thought process and ideology. This is why we use history for everything. It's our guidepost. It's our manual. You know what I mean? It's what guides us. If you have individuals whose results, whose conclusions, whose solutions result in more of the same, and they look just like me, you have the wrong person teaching you. You have the wrong guide. Okay? If you're not being challenged in what's being said, if the results of the conversation are not different, then the results from the conversation are not different. If the results from the solution are not different, if you're getting the same, if it's not different, then it's not appropriate. Okay. And history is how you find out, if you're coming up with the same solutions, because believe it or not, there's nothing new under the sun. There's no new thought process. We all have different ways of expressing it. Different times in history. There are moments in history. George Floyd provided us, sadly, a moment in history that we had not seen before, but the same things that presented themselves at that moment, they've been in history before. Protests have been in history before. A white man lynching a Black man has been in history before. A group of people upset about that, a group of people upset about that for another reason, upset that we're upset about that. That's been in history before. Okay, all these things have been in history. But if we don't, as a people, do our own research and our own study, then we'll keep coming up with the same results. And so that's how when individuals who are teaching you on racial equity, if it's the appropriate person for you to be learning from, whether or not they're appropriate or not, that you can look and say, okay, has this been done in history like that before? What was the result of that? Now, how is what you're telling me going to bring out a different result? How is it going to be different? And we know this by, we're still in 2020. It was in 2020, and this is 2021. So it's not been, just a year ago or so. We're still passing laws. So, if the majority of us, we're listening to the right voices and, allowing ourselves to be guided by it, our actions, our thoughts, our behaviors, allowing ourselves to be guided by the right voices, the right history, we wouldn't still need a law in 2020 to say that Black women and Black children and Black men can wear their hair as it grows naturally out of their head. And yet we still need that to this day. We needed that last year, a law that actually was passed saying that it's okay for you to let your hair grow and for you to wear your hair as it grows out your head. Okay, so anyway, so I needed you to know that is why a meeting with diverse minds, for one, is where you need to be, listening, where you need to be contracting at, but also what you can look for and what earmarks you look for in whatever research you're looking to afterwards. We're just a 1-hour show once a week, and I don't give you everything in the show. It's designed that you will hear some things that will, make you want to go and research further. So when you do that research further, earmarks that you're going to look for are, am I being challenged? Are the results of this, the same? How do I even know if the results are the same? Maybe I need to continue my own personal study with someone who I found, like a meeting on diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton, looking at their resources, immersing myself in this so that I can actually get to a place of where I can vet information, because we can't all vet information. If you don't know history, then it's hard for you to vet, who or what, what I mean? So that is why a meeting on diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton is very particular in how we teach, what we teach, and not apologetic in how that information is shared, and the perspective that it comes from. I won't apologize for being a Black American woman with all of the experiences that I had in life and what they brought me to. I won't apologize for focusing on the Black issue, Black experience to guide our conversations because of all the different things I've just told you. Okay, so a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton is an extension of Diverse Minds Consulting, LLC. And that is at www.diversemindsconsulting.com, www.diversemindsconsulting.com. Check out the website. There we offer consultations, one-on-ones, whole group trainings, cohort trainings. We do quite a few things at Diverse Minds Consulting. Again, check it out, book study groups, and feel free to share that information with your employers, with yourself. You may find something on there that you can use. I've had individuals call, just because they're having, a relationship concern with a person of a different ethnicity, because they just didn't fully understand it. And I've walked them through how to kind of, work through those experiences. So there's a lot there. This weekly conversation is the only free service that I offer. It is, like I said, weekly. I have many shows that I've done. I think about 43 or so, maybe 45 or so by now. They're all on Facebook. I do have some on YouTube and a few other places, but this is the only free service that a meeting of Diverse Minds and Diverse Minds Consulting LLC offers. Use this resource for yourself as you do your studying. If you reach out to me, for Diverse Minds Consulting, like I said, those services are not free. But, I do encourage you to reach out if you have further questions. And again, you can engage online. And oftentimes I do engage with individuals online when I, have time and am able to. So the show has two purposes. One, this is a place where Black and Brown and other folks can come, other people of color can come to gain knowledge. It shouldn't be surprising that even Black and Brown individuals have a very difficult time understanding the experiences that they have, putting a name to it, and then even knowing how to address those experiences. America has done an amazing job of keeping all of us in the dark. If we're not intentional about, researching and understanding what we're experiencing, then we just really have no name for it. And then even after naming it, we don't really know how to address it. That's by design. So this space is designed that Black and Brown and other people of color can come, gain that knowledge, share those experiences, understand that they're not the only one, that this is happening everywhere in every organization, and then find different ways to, strategize to fix it. And also a space where white individuals, white people of white culture can come and listen in, and to those conversations or to those comments, to see how, the comments are, it's interesting. I had another conversation. I have conversations all the time. And in this one, I was letting the other individual know, I said, there are two different people here from two different walks of life who are responding to your commentary in the exact same way. Because the Black experience, while it's not a monolith, we do experience some things the same. So, George Floyd's incident with Derek Chauvin was very similar to I just forgot his name, Rodney King. And the world erupted, America erupted, especially Black individuals erupted at that horror in both of those incidents. So some things, we experience the same, even though I never knew George Floyd a day in my life until today, or, Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery or all these different people, I've never known their names until their incidents happened. And then they touched me very deeply, But so we're not a monolith, but we still do have some experiences the same. So when you come to a meeting with Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton, and we're in the comments, and you're hearing, some of the same thought processes coming out from these people who don't per se know each other, who are not experiencing the same thing at the same place anyways, then it lets you know, for one, that this is not a singular experience with just, you just happen to experience over here, and this is happening everywhere. And so as white people looking on and seeing that, you have a room that you can, as a fly on the wall, kind of see like, wow, okay, not only are they all having the same experiences, they're also all coming with a lot of the same solutions, or they have different solutions that, whatever, you just have that ability to see at a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton in the comments. The second thing that this show offers is it offers white people the ability, white folks, the opportunity to join into the conversation, where appropriate, to join into the conversation, ask questions, and then most importantly, two things most importantly, apply what you've learned and then support what you've learned. One of the two biggest ways, and I'm trying to get to this space where we're just, we can be freely speaking to each other. Two of the biggest ways that whiteness has advanced itself is by economic depression of the Black and Brown community, Black specific community, and then just this oppression, this ability to keep information and knowledge away amongst its oppression, because oppression has just got all kinds of stuff in there. You not only can come and get that information that you need, like I said, be that fly on the wall, ask questions, because like I said, at times we do answer those questions, but also figure out a way to support and then find historically authentic racial equity engagement that you can rely on to give you a transformed experience if you accept it. You're not getting that in most of these spaces that you're in, just so you know. So those are a couple things that this show is designed to do. It is a safe space, safe and courageous. Like I said, we don't shy away from too many terms that are harsh or hard in somebody else's book. They might consider them harsh or hard. We like to speak freely and plainly. I'm always gracious, but I'm honest as well, So those are some of the things, like I said, that you can get from a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton when you come. So we're gonna get right to we're already at 6:52, and I haven't even defined our stuff yet. Today was planned. I planned it to be a shorter session today, but it was important to me that you know some of those things, because I get a lot of people asking, how do I vet? How do I vet? How do I know what I'm hearing from, or what to, what information to, to look to? What do I just what basically? Who, what, where? And what's important to look for. And so hopefully you've gotten a few of those questions answered in this first portion of tonight's show. So we do like to have a shared language on here. We mentioned that already. It's important for us to share language and make sure that we're all starting on the same page. So we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism here. So let's define them. Everything that we talk about is usually from within that lens of those things. So what is diversity? Diversity is simply our difference. Excuse me. That not only includes the color of our skin, but more importantly, what we focus on in the meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton is our diverse thought processes. Each of us have had numerous experiences in life that have shaped how we view the world, the glasses basically that we see things through. Right, we've had, the places that we grew up, the way that our parents trained us or taught us, the school teachers we had, the books that we read from, the preachers that we had, so all those experiences, what we watched, what we read, all those experiences have shaped us into being whoever we are. And those thought processes that come from that are the diversity that we focus on, because that's where we have to change and transform if we want to see some actual differences, some transformation in society. It's our thought process. But that does not, that doesn't take away from our diversity of our skin tones, our hair texture, our, who we love, all that's diverse as well. It's just, I consider those superficial to the real diversity that's needed, and that is in your thought process. What is equity? Again, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. We talk about DEI. So equity is an acknowledgement and an awareness of the barriers that exist. And then actions centered around changing them, centered around eliminating those barriers, centered around, making those barriers go away. Okay. So for example, I've given this example many times. Equity and equality are different. And I like to define those two together because people get them confused. Equality is the idea of being equal. So in the example that I use all the time, you have two individuals who need transportation. One person needs a car, the other person needs a bike. In equality, which when we're trying to be equal, we'd give both people, $5,000. The person who needs a bike will be, their needs will be met. The person who needs a car, their needs will not be fully met. Okay, why they need these things is not a part of the conversation, because I just need you to understand what equity and equality is. Okay, equality says I'm going to give you both the same thing. I've been equal. That's equality. Equity says, okay, you person who need a bike and you person who need a car, I'm going to give you exactly what you need. Person who needs a bike, I'm going to give you $4,000 or $5,000. Let's say we'll give you $5,000 towards a bike so you can get all the things you need for it. Person who needs a car, I'm going to give you $10,000 towards your car so you can get all the things you need for it. Now, these are not very expensive vehicles, but you can get a decent car for $10,000. So I'm going to give you $10,000. Person who gets a bike looking on, and other people, a lot of times it's everybody else. It's not the individuals who have gotten their needs met who are saying this. It's their family members, their friends, it's society that says this, looking on and says, hold on, these two people came to you with a need and you gave one $5,000 and the other $10,000. That's not fair. And that's correct. Equity is not fair. Okay. Equity is not designed to be fair. We don't all need the same thing. We do not all need the same thing. I have 6 children. They don't all need the same thing. My boys don't necessarily need what my girls need. My girls don't necessarily need what my boys need. My older girls don't need what my younger girls need. And my younger girls don't need what my older girls need. And trying to be equal to them, giving them all the same thing, would leave some of them with their needs being unmet. So equity says, I'm going to address your particular personalized need as a person and or a group of people. Okay, that's equity. So equity, and not only am I trying to address your needs as a group of people, I'm acknowledging that there are reasons why, you know, you have this need. There's a reason. I'm aware of the barrier that exists there, and I'm going to, you know, work to eliminate that barrier so that you can have your need met, which means that it's not fair, and we should not seek fairness in our equity, you know, initiatives. That because you're not seeking what's right. If you're not seeking equity, if you're seeking fairness, that's just not what it is. Okay. What is inclusion? Inclusion is having a seat at the table. A lot of people like to say that inclusion is being invited to the dance and then being asked to, you know, dance in the dance, you know what I mean? Or maybe pick a song or something like that. And those are good ways to be inclusive. Inclusion, though, is it's not only being invited to the dance and being able to choose a song, it's being able to create the dance, you know, to plan for it, to coordinate it. Okay. It's the person is sitting at the table of the decision makers, of the creators, and having a voice in the foundation of it. Okay. What we don't need and what we have too often, you know, because especially nowadays, what we're having with it, a lot of people's DEI stuff is, you know, whiteness, and we're going to talk about whiteness a little bit later, so just hang on for just a minute. But whiteness will create something, ask people of color, Black people, brown people to come in and say, okay, how do I need to, you know, what we got to do with this? That's not how you should do things. You don't create something and then ask them to come in and weigh in on it, because now they've got to follow basically what you created. That's not inclusion. Inclusion is saying, we created something. We're taking that and dropping it into the trash. We're all going to sit here at this table. This is what we feel like we need. And generally, you know, when we're talking about these tables, we're talking about boardrooms and, senior leadership and et cetera, you know what I mean? And they're saying, okay, we found that we have a problem like right now. We are at this table. We have this problem. How do we fix this? Everybody who's at the table. Not we come up with a solution and we want you to weigh in on it. No, especially when you're coming up with solutions that for something that doesn't involve you or doesn't, address, that you have no part in. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, people at these tables, we need to be more diverse. Maybe we should just change how do we do that? They come up with these ideas about how they be more diverse and saying this is going to speak to them and that's going to speak to them. And then they bring in people who are diverse and say, okay, what do you think about this? Well, you haven't given them a chance to be included. Okay. That's not inclusion. That's still whiteness guiding things. And you cannot guide stuff. Okay. That's a no-no. So inclusion is not only having a seat at the table, but you have a voice at that table and you're at the foundational creation of whatever is there, whether it's legislation, laws, policies, practices, procedures. Think of inclusion in those spaces. At the creation stage, those voices should be there and they should be included in guiding. There should be equitable voices at the table. And we've talked about this a little bit. When we're talking about equity and we're understanding the dominant culture that we live in, if every voice or the majority of the voices at the table are coming from the perspective of dominant culture, now mind you, as we mentioned before already, people who look like me can come from the perspective of dominant culture easily. They do every day, all day. Okay, those are the ones who you pay the most. Those are who your CEOs and your board members and your senior leadership, those are the ones that white people are most comfortable around, because people who look like me act like them and think like them. Those are the ones they're most comfortable around. Those are the ones who they advance. Okay, people who are actually like me, who don't ascribe to and buy into white dominant culture, oftentimes their voices are small. So when you're talking about including people at the table, and you say, "Oh, we've got 4, white people, and we've got 6 people of color at the table, Black and other people of color at the table, we think we're doing good because we've overbalanced it." Well, if 4 of those people of color and Black people who are sitting in the room also think like dominant culture, you actually only have 2 Black people in the room, 2 Black or brown people in the room. And that's not an equitable representation of thought processes, of thought processes that'll challenge. So you don't actually have equity there. Okay, you have a space where dominant culture is going to be advanced still. So just consider that more, as you are, and we'll talk about that some other time as well. We have talked about it before. We'll talk about it more as well. But ensuring that the voices that are at the table are not dominant culture voices, are not primarily dominant culture voices, okay? Because otherwise you're still gonna get the same outcomes that dominant culture has been getting, okay? Okay, so what is racism? Racism is the marginalization. Sometimes I've talked about how we need to kind of get through this. I want to make a definition that you can more easily use. Racism is so it's so insidious and so big and so that I don't want to rush through these definitions. Okay, you need to know what this is so that you can understand what it does and how it operates, and so that you can fight against it, so that you can become anti-racist, because that's where we're trying to go to, right? So what is racism? Racism is the marginalization or the oppression, I should say, and the oppression. It's the marginalization and the oppression of people of color based on socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people. So marginalization means to assign an unimportant or a powerless position in society. Oppression means to be malicious or to be treated unjustly, often under governmental authority, okay? Under governmental authority. That is key to understanding the difference between racism and prejudice, okay? So racism is the marginalization. You've assigned them a very low role, and the oppression. They've been treated maliciously and unjust with governmental authority. Think of the cops, think of Derek Chauvin and George Floyd. Of people of color is socially constructed. That means that somewhere, somebody at some time sat in some room and said, we want to create a hierarchy based on race. Black people are going to be down here. And anybody else who we don't like, they're going to be down here in the low part, and the other people are going to be up here, and everybody who's up here, the white people who are up here, they're going to be privileged. They're going to have, more benefits, more privileges, more, ability to do whatever. They're going to be free and make more money and, be free to do whatever they want to do. Who's ever white. Okay, that's what racism, how it was created. Racism was engineered, basically created for social and political advantage. The white people up here get to vote. The Black people down there don't, okay? As you learn, and we've talked about racism extensively on here, so I'm not gonna go too far into it, but we've talked about the fact that, racism and the categories of racism have changed, which helps us to understand, and history tells us this, which helps us to understand the engineering of it, the social construction of it, and how it's based on these superficial, factors that, don't have anything to do with who we are on the inside, yet still govern and guide how we view people, how we treat them, and everything that we're dealing with today. Why we have a meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. So the difference, again, between a discrimination and or prejudice and racism is at the point of power. That oppression that's in the definition of racism being coupled with the governmental authority is what makes racism different than discrimination and prejudice. You have to have that power of authority, that governmental power, coupled with your discrimination, coupled with your, disregard and your oppression and your marginalization of a group of people in order to rise to the level of racism. This is why we say Black and brown people cannot be racist. They can be prejudiced, they can be discriminatory, they can prejudge, they can be biased. They do not hold the authority, the governmental authority to suppress any other groups of people, at all. They just don't. Whereas every white person has the ability to oppress in that way. So I didn't just say that every white person was racist. I hope you're hearing that. I did not say that. I said they hold the governmental power by proxy of just because they're white to be racist. Okay, so they can be. They're the only ones who can be because of that power that they have, that governmental authority power, because they hold that power, because our Constitution was written in a way that said, you know, Black people are not allowed to be in this. Black people are not human. Black people are 3/5, you know, human. Because our Constitution, again, because we're talking about a social construction, a created and engineered experience. But in that engineering, it was very intentional, specifically that Black people, they were the original people, you know, aside from our indigenous brothers and sisters who, you know, there's some differences in how this social construction was created. But, you know, like I said, our Black people were the original ones that we have to have a demarcation, a difference. We have to be able to distinguish between them. These people aren't human, we are. These people are, can't think, we can. These people, you know, their brains don't work, ours, you know, all that stuff, primarily so that white Americans could justify their oppression and marginalization of this group of people. They had to make them less than people, which is also why Meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton focuses on the Black experience, because they were the originals, okay? Us and indigenous folks. Okay, so that's what racism is. What is anti-racism? Anti-racism is simply actively and intentionally working to dismantle and oppose racism. So you gotta know what racism is. You gotta know how it shows up in your life. You gotta know how it shows up in society. You gotta know how it shows up in laws, how it shows up in politicians, how it shows up in policies and practices at your organizations, how it shows up in yourself. And then you got to actively work to dismantle that. So that obviously requires some education, some research, some study, continual study, so that you can, you know what it looks like and then work against it when you see it happening. Okay, I am actually going to stop there because I've gone for as long as I wanted to go. So I'm actually going to stop there. I appreciate you so much for joining a Meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. We have had a pretty decent discussion on things that I thought was very important for tonight. You are going to see me intermittently for the next couple of months. I am right now finishing my last 2 classes for my dual degrees that I am studying for. I have 2 classes left, literally 2 classes, and I am done with these 2 degrees, okay, 2 full majors. So I am going to be intermittently live. I'll still be sharing shows for the duration, you know, but I have got to focus on these classes. There's some difficult stuff that I'm having to learn. I waited to the last minute I didn't really wait till the last minute, but you know, these are my last 2 classes and they're higher classes. I should have took them first, right? But either way, I'm not coasting through this next 8 weeks. I got to actually put some real study in. So I'm going to have to take some time to study, but I'll be here intermittently. You know, sometimes I'll jump on and do a live. Other times I'm going to just share, but I will be fully back, once these classes are over and I'm almost done. So I got to kind of focus and buckle down. But I appreciate you all for joining me for another Meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. I appreciate your support. Check out, like I said, www.diversemindsconsulting.com. Recommend it to your supervisors, organizations, yourself. Like I said, I help individuals as well as I'm building that business up. Figure out ways how you can support, even if it's just liking and sharing this page, and recommending it to others so that they can come and learn information. We can't transform our society by keeping this amazing information to ourselves. We have got to spread it all around. We've got to recommend it out. And so I'm hoping that you'll do that for me. Thank you so much, like I said, you all for joining. I appreciate you, Jamie and Jan, and those of you others who joined. Thank you so much. And I will see you all. I may or may not see you next week, but I'll put something up next week. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.